It has been over a year since my pig guide has come out, and therefore since that, there's been quite a few killers that have come out, meaning there's quite a few perks that have come out that I've not been able to include in my guide. And since pig seems to not be getting an add-on change for, well, seemingly ever, I figured rather than updating the pig guide, I will just make another video now where I talk about the new perks that have come out, if you should run them and what they do. The killers we've got are all the way from Deathslinger up to the Cenobite, which is the new killer, which isn't out yet, but I can use the perks from the PTB to tell you how good they're going to be. I mean, I can roughly tell. I can tell these things usually just by looking at them. So starting off, we have Deathslinger. Deathslinger's 3 perks are Gearhead, Dead Man Switch, and Retribution. None of these 3 perks, as I'm sure you're aware, are particularly brilliant, but let's talk about them in a little bit more detail. So Gearhead allows you to see the auras of generators if a survivor hits a good skill check on them after you have hit someone 2 times with your basic attack. This perk is pretty bad. It was actually quite decent in its original PTB, but it got nerfed from that. Basic attacks makes it hard to use with pig because you should really be dashing most of the time. Plus, there's just the issues of it being Gearhead, where it's just not a great perk, so the aura doesn't last very long and it's based off of skill checks. But Gearhead's one of those perks where if it was actually buffed ever to become not bad, then it actually would be quite a good perk on pig, I reckon. A lot of the more recent perks, they've dropped the basic attack requirement on them, and I feel like Gearhead could go down that road, and it would actually be quite a decent perk on pig. So I'd keep an eye out on this one if the devs ever get around to buffing some of these perks, but you know, it seems unlikely at the moment, but you never know. Moving on to Dead Man Switch. Now, this perk, again, suffers from being almost good, but not quite there. Whenever you hook your obsession, any generator that a survivor lets go of becomes blocked. This is more aimed at high mobility killers, or like Doctor on the game map, for example. Again, one of those perks that isn't particularly good on pig because she's quite slow, but if they ever change DMS, then it could potentially be quite a good perk on her, like increasing the time or changing the requirements. But for now, I would avoid this perk unless you're doing a meme build. And finally, we've got Retribution, which is a Hex perk. This is a perk that I'm not a fan of, I'll be honest. Deathslinger had some rough perks, he really did. Again, not a very good perk in its current state, but could be with some changes. Oblivious is cool when you cleanse a dull totem, but because unless you run through the hunt, you have no idea when a dull totem gets cleansed. Only way to know is a little ping notification from Thrill of the Hunt, but it still doesn't tell you where the totem was. Meaning, you don't really know who's oblivious and who isn't. Plus, you can negate oblivious by the fact that you can just crouch. The auras are nice, I will admit. The auras for cleansing a hex is nice, but that means you've got to go full-on hex build, at least 3 hex perks, and again, that's kind of memey. So use this perk if you're doing a meme build. Poof, Deathslinger had some rough ones, but the thing with his perks, I feel like a lot of them could be decent with slight changes to them, so I'd still keep an eye out for them just in case. Right, so moving on to Pyramid Head, we've got some pretty decent ones here actually. Forced Penance could be quite a good perk on her actually. Forced Penance causes the broken status effect whenever you M1 someone while you are carrying a survivor. Again, you could look at it as a meme perk, however, you can crouch and hide your heartbeat, blah blah blah, and you could potentially sneak up to people while they're injured since they cannot heal for at least a minute. It's a minute at tier 1, so goodness knows what it is at tier 3, but you could easily sneak up to these people while they are like not mending, while they're on a gen or whatever they're doing while injured. So it's not the worst perk in the world. There's definitely worse out there, but it's still more on the scale towards meme than good, but it's an option. It's definitely an option. Deathbound is a perk that you can actually synergize with Nurse's Cooling, which allows you to see the location of someone like a Doctor Scream if they heal and they are more than 32 meters away from you. It's actually not the worst. Again, you could use this to sort of triangulate someone's location if you're not using Whispers and M&A. More memey, but like it's something you could do. I think it's a less reliable Discordance, so I still think you'd be better off using something like Discordance. but it's not bad. It's not bad. You can get away with this perk. If it's in your blood weapon, it's all you've got. You can definitely get away with this perk, and there's definitely builds for it. Nurse's Cooling and Deathbound means there's literally no escape to healing, so there's builds for it. There's definitely things you can do with this perk. Not too bad. Next, we've got Trail of Torment. Now, this perk is a fantastic perk, actually. I absolutely adore this perk. I love it on killers like Nurse. Really, really good on Billy. High mobility killers. Problem with this perk is that the whole point of it is to kick a gen and then give you undetectable. But that's just Pig's power. So you have absolutely no reason to use this on Pig. It's a fantastic perk, and I couldn't recommend it enough on other killers. Like Bubba is amazing on Bubba as well. But Pig, there's better out there. You shouldn't use it. You really shouldn't. It's useless on her. It just gives her her power. Right, so moving on to Blight. Blight is genuinely one of my favorite killers in the game. I absolutely adore him. But his perks are... Well, let's start with Undying. If you've got any game knowledge at all in Dead by Daylight, then you know what this perk does already, and you know how good it is and how versatile it is. But if you're new to the game, basically it saves your hex perks. So the first hex perk that is cleansed is always Undying. Meaning if you've got Ruin and Undying, it is impossible for your Ruin to go away on the first cleanse. So with this perk, just if you're going for a totem build, use this perk. It's as simple as that. There's not a lot to say about this perk. It's outstandingly good. It's already been nerfed and it's still amazing. Just it's really good. It's really, really good. Borderline boring with Ruin, but we'll ignore that for the sake of the video. It's really, really good. It's not just for slowdown builds either. Any hex build, Devour Hope, Third Seal, any hex build. It's a really good perk, and it's definitely a staple for it. So use it. Right. So now we move on to Blood Favor. This is easily the worst hex perk in the game. I think. Yeah, the worst hex perk in the game. Short thing in my notes. It literally just says hex perk with a cooldown. That's it. It doesn't say anything what it does, but what it actually does, whenever you M1 someone, the pallets around you are blocked. 15 meters, I believe it is, and it has a massive cooldown. The problem with that is that survivors just sprint to the next pallet. You hit them, they get a speed boost. The pallets nearby being blocked doesn't matter. So even then, it's not a particularly brilliant perk. Then it has a cooldown, and then it's a hex perk, so you can lose this ability anyway, and it's... Oof. Don't use this perk. It's really not good. Just do not use it. Seriously. Don't. Just don't. Yeah, sadly this is one of those perks that could be really, really sick with some slight changes, but it's never going to get these changes, let's be honest. Like, it could easily not be a hex perk, for example, or it could easily not have a cooldown. One of those two things. Range as well could be bigger. So keep an eye on it, I suppose. It could be quite a good perk with some changes, but let's be honest, those changes aren't going to happen anytime soon. Next up is a particularly cool perk, actually, called Dragon's Grip. Whenever you kick a gen, for the next 30 seconds or so, if a survivor touches the generator, they become one-shot. It's actually quite neat, and I will admit I've used this quite a lot, with quite a lot of success as well on the Nurse and high mobility killers again. On a killer like Pig, it actually could work, because while you don't have high mobility, you can fake being far away because you just have no heartbeat. But the only downside with it is that it's basic attack because you've got to one-shot them. But, you know, for the most part, Dragon's Grip actually could work on Pig with the right build around it. Definitely pick this one up. Definitely try it out. I think it could work quite well on her. Right, so moving on to the twins. This is easily my least favorite killer in the game, as you're all very, very aware. But the perks she's got aren't horrible. Well, they're not great. There's one decent perk. We'll get to it. But we're going to start off with Hoarder, and Hoarder is probably the worst perk in the game. So basically, anytime someone searches a chest, you get a notification, and whenever they pick up an item, you get a notification. Which sounds okay, but it adds 2 chests to the map, and initially, Hoarder was going to be like an anti-plunderers, so it was going to reduce the chances of getting good items from chests. And then it didn't work, and Behavior removed this, so all it does now effectively is give you the odd notification in return of them getting more keys because they can plunder more often. So yeah, it's not very good. Really don't use it unless you're like memeing, hardcore memeing. Don't use this perk. The auras and the notifications are not worth the extra key chance. They're just not. Moving on to Oppression. This is actually quite a good perk, and I actually would use it on Pig, to be honest. Oppression with Surveillance is actually really nice, and I use it instead of Surge Surveillance on killers that mainly don't use basic attacks. So on Deathslinger, I will use Surge Surveillance, but on killers like Trickster, I will use Oppression Surveillance because Trickster is mainly downing with knives and they don't count as basic attacks. Same thing with Pig, she's mainly going to be downing with her dash, and that isn't basic, so if you want some tracking and some gen slowdown that's not too aggressive, definitely have a look at Oppression. Oppression with Surveillance, which is Pig's perk, is actually a solid combo, and I really recommend it. I genuinely quite like this combo. Sure, Oppression could be better, the cooldown's a bit long, but as far as it goes, it's not too bad. There's definitely worse out there. Next up is Coup de Grace. Coup de Grace is another perk that could be good, but isn't. I like it on Spirit, though. I tend to stack it on Spirit with double lunge add-ons that Spirit has, and I run it on tier 3 Mars as well occasionally. But it got nerfed from the PTB, and it already wasn't brilliant in PTB, so again, more of a meme perk. Pretty bad on Pig because it's basic attack only, so it doesn't work on ambush. It's kind of like if you want to ambush but M1 at the same time, I guess. Try it out, but it's not worth it. It's a bad perk. It's honestly just not very good. Moving on to the Trickster. Now, this killer is quite controversial. Some love him, some can't stand him. But his perks actually weren't too bad. Starting off with Starstruck. Again, this is a meme perk, but I have run this on Pig, actually, and I have gone from a 0k to a 4k with this on stream. I got against a really, really cocky team on the game map, and they just ran me around the entire game for 5 gens, and I got like 1 hook because it's the game map, and if you simply hold W on that map, you shouldn't really go down to an M1 killer. So they were doing this, but I had Starstruck. So on that 1 down at the end of the game, they all tried to body block and didn't notice that I had Starstruck. And the last guy realized and ran, but Starstruck causes a lingering effect on the 1-shot once they leave the heartbeat. So I managed to slug the team and chase this guy around the map, and actually got a 4k out of that game purely from Starstruck on Pig. Still wouldn't recommend it too much. I guess you could run this actually with Force Penance, potentially, although both of them would really deter going for hits. It's something you could do. Potentially, something you could do maybe with Agitation. It's a great perk as well. But again, this is more of a meme build. No one runs Starstruck Agitation. Everyone runs Ruin Undying. You get the idea. It's an off-meta build, I should say. That being said, I still think it's worth picking up and at least trying 1 time. You never know, you might like it. Next up, we have Crowd Control, a hex perk that is kind of a bit like Bamboozle, except rather than you vaulting the winner to block it, it's whenever they vault. This is actually a really good perk, especially with Undying. You can get some pretty quick chases on a lot of maps, really, a lot of maze tiles. You could just completely remove tiles while chasing them because they vault it, the tiles are useless. They've got to move on. So you actually can get quite a lot of success out of this perk. It's still not very used. You hardly see this perk out in the wild, but it's actually not that bad. Would recommend definitely trying it out at least 1 time. Definitely with Undying, though. I wouldn't bring it by itself. It's not worth it by itself. It'll break too quickly. But with Undying, you could definitely get a couple of chases, 2 or 3 chases out of it before it goes away. And sometimes even longer than that, depending on the map. So yeah, try this perk out. It's not horrible. It's not completely horrible. No Way Out is effectively a better Remember Me. It's really good. After hooking 4 people, the exit gate is blocked for an obscene amount of time. Definitely, I would try this out on Pig if you want to do an endgame build. Endgame Pig still exists. You just have to trap at 1 gen. So you'd place all 4 of your traps at 1 gen. They pop the last gen. Exit gates are blocked. And then you just go around chasing people because there's nothing else they can do other than go for helmets. They can't progress the game. It just blocks them. Although, if you're doing an endgame Pig build, I would recommend Blood Warden more than a perk like this. Endgame Pig is mainly revolved around the trap timer and the endgame timer going at the same time. So something like Blood Warden would help you out a lot more. You hook someone and then open the gate, triggers Blood Warden, and then everyone's got to run around frantically with helmets on, trying to get them off, but also get out at the same time. So there are other perks. Noed is a good endgame perk for Pig as well. It works, this perk. It does work. You can get some disgusting long endgames with this, especially with Remember Me actually stacked. You can get some pretty disgusting endgame builds with No Way Out. It's not too bad. Would definitely pick this up. Trickster's perks on the whole are a lot better than Twins, really, aren't they? Blight had decent ones. Deathslinger had horrible ones. Twins had pretty horrible perks. It's time to move on to Nemesis. These perks are actually a good example of behavior-changing perks for the good. So Hysteria was awful in the PTB. It really was. It was basic attack only. But they changed the perk. So all other survivors become oblivious once I injure one survivor, which isn't too bad, really. But generally, it's better on higher mobility killers, so you can injure one, then chainsaw across the map or blink across the map, and other people can't hear your heartbeat because they're oblivious. But, you know, on the odd example on Pig, I suppose it could be good in grouped up areas. But for the most part, this perk is better on higher mobility killers, but it's no way a bad perk. It is in no way a bad perk. Lethal Pursuer is actually a really good perk on Pig. If you don't want to run Whispers because you don't understand it, or you don't have it, or which is unlikely, but whatever reason why you don't want to run Whispers, Monitor, and Abuse, Lethal Pursuer is actually a really, really nice perk. It allows you to see the auras of everybody once the game starts, meaning you know where everyone is, and you can pick immediately where to go as killer. And as Pig, you know when to crouch as well, because you'll have seen them before you get there, so you can judge when 32 meters is. All round, really nice perk. Only downside is that it is for those couple of seconds once the game starts, and then that's it for the rest of the entire game. You're down to 3 perks. So I definitely wouldn't run a perk like Corrupt with it, because then you're down to 2 perks after 2 minutes. But, you know, the choice is yours. It's definitely a decent perk. Would try it out on Pig. If you don't like it, there's always Whispers M&A. Next up is Eruption. This is a good alternative to Oppression. Each time you kick a gen, it's tagged, and then when you down someone, the gens explode. This is better on higher mobility killers again, because you can go around kicking multiple gens and then down someone and they all explode. But on Pig, you could get a kick or 2 potentially in a chase, but there's a lot of downtime with this perk. There's a lot of kicking gens, so if you're not fully spec'd for like Brutal Strength for the gen kicking, then it's probably not going to be worth it by itself. But this perk can synergize with other perks pretty well. Again, mainly on killers like Nurse, though, and Billy, and killers like that. Anything that can teleport, Demogorgon as well. And finally, we move on to the Cenobite, the brand new killer that, at the time of the video going live, isn't even out yet. But he is in PTB, so we have got a pretty decent idea of what the perks do. Obviously, the values may change when it goes to live, but for now, I'm going off the PTB. And to be honest, the perks he's got are actually really good. All 3 of them, I think, are solid. Not all of them are good on Pig, but I think all of them are solid. So starting off with Scourge Hook, Gift of Pain. This is a perk that marks 4 random hooks as special hooks, and when you hook someone on the special hook, they gain the Mangled and Hemorrhage effect. And when unhooked, they also get an additional 9% penalty on them when they heal until you next chase them. This is actually pretty good on Pig. Sloppy is basic attack only, so you can use this perk to get around the fact that Sloppy is basic attack only, so you can dash all the time. And on top of that, you also get the 9% repair and healing speed debuff until you next chase them. So this is actually a really, really nice perk for Pig. Obviously, you know what I think of slowdown perks, so you know that I internally, you know. But for the sake of the video, it's actually quite a good perk, so definitely I'd pick this one up. Next, we have Hex Plaything. This is a really good perk, actually. Whenever you hook someone, they become affected by the Oblivious status effect forever, and the only way they can get rid of the effect is by cleansing a dull totem that appears on the map. And for the first 90 seconds, the only person that can cleanse the dull totem is the person affected by Oblivious. So you're guaranteed to have the totem up for at least a little bit. Though granted, the survivor can see the aura of the totem, but it's only for a short range. Again, this is actually quite a nice perk because it removes the whole you don't know who's oblivious thing, because you can just tell who's oblivious, because is the guy that was on the hook. With Pig, though, not great, because it kind of counteracts her power. Oblivious is a great status effect if used properly, like this, but you can just crouch as Pig, so Oblivious doesn't do as much with her as it does with other killers, so while I would pick this perk up, I wouldn't use it on Pig. There's definitely other perks out there. On top of that, I'm not actually sure how this perk is going to interact with Undying. It would definitely be worth testing that out. Someone else in the comments can let me know. I'm not going to do it. And last but not least, we have Deadlock. Another perk that's actually quite decent. When a gen turns on, the next gen with the most progress is blocked for 30 seconds, and you see its aura in white, meaning that when a gen turns on, you can, as Pig, sneak up to the next repaired gen and ambush them before they get a chance to repair it again, which actually is quite a nice thing. Only downside with this perk is that obviously popping a gen is random, so you could be mid-chase when this perk turns on, so you'd have to drop chase just to get into another chase. Not sure how much that's going to be worth it in the long run, but on paper right now it actually seems like it could be decent. Seems like it synergizes quite well with her stealth. Obviously how much that ends up being good we'll see in the long run, but initial impressions I've got right now is that it seems like a decent perk on Pig. Seems like a good way of getting into chases quite quickly. So there you have it. That's every single perk since the Pig guide. There's quite a lot of them in there, and a lot of them aren't that great, but especially the newer ones. We've got some decent perks out there that you can definitely run, and I would like to put a lot of these into some builds for you in YouTube videos later down the line, but for now, we'll see. Let me know what you think of everything in the comments, and what do you think of the new guy? I love this killer. I think he's great. I think it's really, really, really good. I'm very impressed with him. He's a bit... You know, it's some say he's like Nurse with more steps or Clown with more steps, but I don't care. He's a lot more fun than, well, to me he's the most fun killer they've had since Blight, and because we've had Twins, Trickster, and Nemesis, and I mean I'm not a big fan of all of them. I'm all right with Trickster, but yeah. So I like this guy a lot. Let me know what you think, and make sure to like the video as well and subscribe if you are new here. And I will catch you in the next one, everybody. Later.